Let's learn something really quick.
If you got the time, absolutely. And you got the discipline, there's no question about it.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great practice to put into your everyday life, you guys.
You generally regret the things you don't do, not the things you did do. Let me say it that way.
Mic drop. This was just awesome. I love meeting my guests in person, and it's a whole nother animal, and the energy is just electric. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bring you incredible guests from all over the world, so sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is the founder of the Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories podcast. She is author of over a dozen books and the explorer of metaphysical mysteries. Please welcome Brownell Landrum. Brownell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about label free.
Oh, yes. Well, we aspire to live label free so that we can just live the best way possible.
That sounds great to me. Great to me.
You are multi-talented.
Thank you.
And I kind of want to we'll get into all your books, but how or why did you become explorer of metaphysical mysteries, and what does that mean?
Well, it means because why not, right? I mean, that's like once you start getting into the meaning of life, and you start looking at life in a deeper way, then it kind of keeps going. And the explorer part is a number of years ago, I met a man and he said, Brownell, he said, and I was like, oh, this is the answer to everything. He said, no, you're an explorer and you're always going to be an explorer. And I love that because that means it's just like there's never really a definitive answer because you're always exploring. There's no limit to the knowledge. And so, these mysteries are fun. They're fun to write, as I know we're going to talk about my stories that I've written. And I want to share them with the world because I've seen how they can, go back to the label free. Once people start getting out of their boxes and their upbringing and their rules and start looking at new possibilities, there's just no end to what cool stuff can happen,
Yeah, for sure. What does metaphysical mean in terms of the audience if they don't know exactly what that is?
Well, obviously there's probably a lot of people have different definitions, but for me, it's beyond the physical by definition, right? Metaphysical means beyond the physical. And it means it's things that may not be easily defined or measured, although I think they are becoming more and more. It's like, I love the Max Planck. I don't know if you knew who he was, but he was the founder of quantum physics. And he said, the closer we can bring science and religion together, the better off we'll be. I'm totally fair.
Yeah.
But really it is. It's kind of like the physical world we can define. Physics is always taking that to a new level. And then the spiritual world is always adding new dimensions. And so I really think the most we can do that together. So what are those mysteries? What are those things like life after death or reincarnation or our soul purpose or all of these kinds of things? How can we pull those and solve those mysteries and look at those mysteries?
Once you start going down those rabbit holes, it's hard to just keep going and going and going because it's fascinating. If you're able to open your mind up to things that aren't like physical and tangible that you can hold in your hand, it's really like the sky's the limit onto things that you can really uncover. And I love that, and I can't wait to hear more about how you've applied that to some of your books. So you've written over a dozen books and screenplays ranging from nonfiction and fiction, and you also children's books. So you are super multi-talented. What is your favorite book to write? Fiction, nonfiction, children's books, screenplays? What?
Definitely fiction. I like writing the screenplay first when I'm writing a project, just because I get the structure down and I get the basic story, but it's not really fun until it's a novel, because that's when you really add the dimension to the characters and you get deeper into motivations and, you can add the side characters and, all the other kinds of things. So this new trilogy that I have that came out just this week is called We Meet Again. And it's about a famous couple from history who is reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that will change the world.
Ooh.
So that was the most fun to write, most difficult, because I had to do lots of research on history and the history of reincarnation and secret societies and religion and all these things. And to lay all the clues, like if you read it, you'll see that there's all throughout, there's all these clues. And if I'm going to be talking about a green couch in the story, it matters, right? There's no superfluous description unless it really is important to some mystery within the story. So that was really fun and especially great challenge. And then going in and like looking at some of my heroes from history, like Pythagoras. I don't know how much you know about Pythagoras, but he was probably one of the first, if not the first, to talk about reincarnation. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, all were students of Pythagoras. Such the cool dude. And then like getting into Giordano Bruno, who I don't know if you know who he is. He's another hero. So it was fun weaving in real history characters into fictional characters that may or may not have been true. We don't know.
Wow, what an incredible skill set that you have. Like, I can't even wrap my head around how I would even begin to write a story like that.
Well, it really, my first novels, they're called duet novels. And that was my first foray into fiction. And the first novel, I just wrote a love story, right?
Okay.
And then I thought, well, I'm going to write a sequel to that, but I'm going to write it from their previous lifetime.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So and I know, I can tell by looking at you, like, I think I'm getting that now because it's sort of the same characters in a whole different time period, a whole different life, a whole different world. But if you love stories and if you love love stories, you love your characters, but you kind of get tired once they get together and everything's all happy. Right. So in this way, it's just so much fun to go, wait a minute, I want to introduce them now. In that one, like a lifetime in the Old West, and another one in the Empire, and then in this one, I have them as a nun and a priest, 100 years ago, and as a princess and an artist apprentice, in the Renaissance, and then of course as the famous couple that I allude to. So you start looking at how those threads can be very similar characteristics, but very different situations and circumstances.
I take you believe in reincarnation then.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Voltaire, it's no more surprising to be born multiple times than once. I mean, like, it's kind of crazy to think we would be born once. Like, how would that explain people having, short lives or certain kinds of lives? And, one of the things I think, and you'll probably already be aligned with this, but the whole label-free thing, all of a sudden, if you believe in reincarnation, your labels go away.
Right.
Your prejudices go away, right? It's like you've probably been different races and you've probably been different nationalities and different income levels and different genders. And now all of a sudden, how can you be prejudiced against somebody if you've been that before, right? How can you label yourself one thing or another if you've been all those things?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really fun.
I actually watched a show where there was a psychic that was brought in for this couple, and she really specializes in hypnotizing the person and going back into their former life. And so I think that there is a possibility that some of us have been reincarnated. I mean, you have to really be open to something that is not, like, you can't really see, like, you know what I mean? Like, witness. And I don't know how to explain it. After seeing that clip out of that show, I'm like, I am more open to the idea that we are reincarnated, because that would be very hard for someone just to make all that up just on the fly.
Well, and, one thing, as you mentioned, I have a podcast that's called Life is a Trip, Reincarnation Stories, and I also have a Facebook group by that name. And one of the parameters within our group is that the stories can be fictional or factual.
Okay.
So what that does is it takes the limits away and says, you don't have to prove anything. But if that psychic is coming up with that, or you're coming up with that in a regression, it's coming up for a reason. There's some lesson, some psychological, even if you just take it outside of the realm of the metaphysical and go, there's a psychological reason this is coming up, something for you to learn. And it's an interesting story, and nobody's going to try to argue with you and force you to prove it.
Yeah.
So no matter what. And so I tell people, like, if you think, oh, I might have been this in this time period, or this kind of person, or, an Egyptian princess or whatever, then start writing the story, because it's going to come up, and whatever comes up is going to be interesting to you and may help you with what you're going through today. So now, from a proof standpoint, there are different ways to prove it. In fact, my novel, But We Meet Again, is about that. Really, that's one of the things I share. How can you prove it? And I'll get to that in a second. But what's happening really today is that there are thousands of cases of children who remember very specific past lives that they couldn't possibly remember any other way. Like, they can't do, like the little boy, of course, the famous story of the little boy that remembers, details on a World War II plane that he had never seen at 4 years old, right? But he remembers that lifetime. Some of those things, there is no other explanation. Like there is no possible other way. I'm not one of those people like has to be proven or you have to fill in,
Right.
well, a psychic's not going to tell you the truth, but this data will. Again, if it helps you live your life better and gives your life more meaning and helps you break down barriers and open your mind, then it's all good to me, right? And so that's like our podcast is different writers. I've had writers that are like professional writers who never written a reincarnation story, who write a story like that it's the easiest story they've ever written because it just came to them,
Yeah.
and then we just share them. And if it opens people's minds, because 1.5 billion people in the world believe in reincarnation. Over 30% of Americans believe in reincarnation. And that's when they're asked, right? I mean, there's probably another, at least 30% who are like, I kind of think maybe it does make sense.
Yeah, I'm that other 30%.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, wait a minute. I can't say no, right? I can't say it's not true. And it's, I always thought maybe I lived in this time period or I have a certain affinity to this or that. So, it's much more open than people think. I mean, even within Christianity, which, my book does get into some of the history within religion.
Oh, wow.
Of the faith. Yeah, it's always, it's fiction. That's like a Da Vinci Code, right?
Yeah.
With reincarnation and love story thrown in. But, when you look at that, you're like, well, isn't the whole foundation of Christianity is that he's going to come back again?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that reincarnation? I mean,
yeah, that's a great point. Holy cow.
What could it be,
Yeah.
So again, it's all interpretation and I'm not trying to, force anybody to believe anything. I just think these are great stories,
Absolutely. And it allows people to, it allows them to open their mind to something that could be possible. I think that's what fiction does.
Thank you. That's exactly right. That's why fiction really helps because people can suspend their disbelief and just enjoy fiction. And then that gives them a chance to open their minds. I mean, some of my most beloved fans are those whose religion would say, no, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And then they're reading and they're loving these stories. But I'm like, you can watch Back to the Future and not believe in time travel. You can still enjoy the story.
Exactly. Same thing. How long have you been an author for?
My first book I wrote it in 2006. And it's called 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen.
Did you always want to be an author?
I was always in marketing, so I was kind of always in a creative sort of field, but I never thought I'd write a book, and the first book is, nonfiction, right? I mean, when people say everything happens for a reason, I was like, yeah, I wrote the book on it. And like, yeah, it really does. So I never thought I'd get into writing fiction though, until later. And then I thought, well, I guess I can try this. And I had a blast.
So I have a friend that I used to work with in corporate and that he became a fiction writer. And you would have never thought that looking at him, like he would come up with these crazy stories. And I just find it like that takes such a special skill set to allow yourself almost to transport yourself into another world, right? Where you're like imagining and creating this world around you and like putting it on paper. And so that when people read it, they have this experience and they're going to this world that you created. And you guys get into such detail that you can actually picture it while you're reading the story.
It's a fascinating process. In fact, I wrote a story this year. This last year has been quite an extraordinary year for me. I'm living a nomadic life so I talk about label free. I don't even know where I'm going to end up.
I love that.
So I'm writing a story. And as I'm writing it, I realize it's real. Like,
wow,
I'm writing the truth. And I'm thinking I'm creating characters and I'm writing the truth. And let me, to explain that, this is really trippy, okay? So you want to get into the metaphysical trippy stuff. I decide I want to write it from what I call the upstairs, right? Mm-hmm. And that would be like from the guides, angels,
right,
spirit, whatever words you want to use for it. And I'm writing it from their perspective. And I'm writing like characters and I realize they're telling me who they are and they're real.
Wow. That's heavy.
It's heavy and it's also really funny. Like the characters are funny. Like they're not like super serious upstairs either. And that they're telling me who they are. And 2 of the characters are guides. One I call X and one I call Y. I think I did that. Like I don't even know subconsciously why I did that, but I think I did it because it helps people just kind of relate anybody's guides. It could be anybody's.
Sure.
And then I have 2 what I call traffic angels. And the traffic angels their job is to have, if you have this person here and this person here, how do you get them together? And they do all the logistics.
Okay.
And in this story, I lived this crazy year where I went from Aspen, Colorado to living in Italy for 3 months, to then going to Tunisia for 3.5 months. And like, of all places, right? And it's just like this crazy world. And that's partly what this story is about. The day after I get to Tunisia, I meet a man. I didn't expect to meet anybody in Tunisia. I'm going for a writing retreat, as a kind of a layover between going back to Italy. And that's what the story is about, is how the traffic angels and how this team upstairs set this whole thing up for me to meet this.
Wow.
So I call it the end, a love story to the universe. And it really is so incredible. And like you said, as I'm creating the world, they're telling me who they are. And they're still very active in my life now. Like, they're guiding me to tell me where I'm going to go next. We live our life and we sit there and say, okay, I have this goal and I want to make this accomplished. And I'm sitting there telling the universe or God or whatever you want to say, this is what I want to do. And then all of a sudden you realize that, well, maybe they want something else.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going to knock you on another path that you didn't expect. And so to get kind of release all that and just let them guide, it has been really, really interesting in such a profound way. And I think a lot of stories are like that. Like Bob Dylan said that the song was already there before I came around. I just got the pencil and wrote it down.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, sometimes these ideas are part of another, consciousness, if you will, and we tap into them as writers. So I think, when you say not everybody can do it, I think they can, because it's just a radio frequency that some of us dial into. And it's there for everybody to listen to.
I love that story, and kind of gave me goosebumps. Highlight your podcast really quick before we start wrapping things up. I know you mentioned something about it a few minutes ago, but it's Life is a Trip, Reincarnation Stories podcast. What can your audience or when someone tuning in, what can they get from your podcast?
It's just stories. So you go up there, they can be fictional or factual, and just go listen to stories. So if somebody has a story and they want to submit it, then we're open to that. We have different writers or of different kinds. It's not really like, oh, I remember being this. It's got to be kind of a story, like written like a story with the beginning, middle, and end, and all of that. But as far as listening to it, it's not an interview like this. Okay. It's just stories to go. It's kind of like modern love. I call it like a metaphysical modern love, if you know that podcast, which is a New York Times podcast. It's just stories. And we have Life is a Trip Reincarnation Facebook group too. So everybody's invited to join that. And that's more, let's share, anecdotes or ideas or concepts and stuff like that. So I love nurturing new talent. I love getting more stories out there. There's, like I said, 1.5 billion people believe in reincarnation. There are not enough stories. And if my legacy is to support another writer to get their work out in the world, I am all for it. And we're on IMDb, so they get IMDb credit.
Cool. Okay.
It's
cool.
quite exciting.
Beautiful. With that being said, Brownell, where can people find you, connect with you, and learn more about your books and your podcasts and all things with your name on it?
Okay. Well, first I want to say that my the end, as I mentioned, is free. So you can download that. The first book in my We Meet Again series is 99 cents. So very easy, accessible. You can find me. I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. So it's easy to Google me. My website, brownelllandrum.com, BROWNELL, and then Landrum, LANDRUM.com. And find my Facebook group, because you can find me that way. Please reach out and let me know what you think about my stories, and let's just kind of expand minds together.
That's right. I love that. You guys, I'm going to put those links in the show notes. So if you loved everything that Brownell was talking about today, to go ahead and click the link, go purchase her books, go join her Facebook group, and, explore reincarnation. I think it would be a fun conversation. Brownell, this is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
I think the most important thing is I really feel like we need to get to our why, right? So If you have a past life memory, what's the why? If you have a healing issue, what's the why? That's a thread through all of my writing. And I just think there's always a why. And you get to the why, you can get to the healing, you can get to the path you need to be on.
Yes, I love that. That was good. I don't think I've heard something like that before. Get to the why. Brownell, thank you so much for sharing your journey. Where are you today? In what part of the world?
Part of the world. Right now I'm in Atlanta. I think I'm going back to Tunisia later this year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know from there.
How fun. Well, awesome. Keep expanding minds and exploring the metaphysical mysteries, because we need people like you to teach others to open their mind and realize that there's more to just the physical.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.